The empty reservation, Julian Foster checked his Patek Philippe watch for the fifth time. 45 minutes late, the champagne had long since lost its bubbles, much like his enthusiasm for the evening ahead. At 42, he had built quantum innovations into a technology empire worth billions. But tonight, sitting alone at the best table in Lumiere, he felt like the poorest man in Seattle. "Would you like me to refresh your champagne, sir?" asked the sommelier, his voice carefully calibrated to hide any hint of pity. "No, thank you," Julian replied, his fingers absently tracing the condensation on the untouched water glass across the table. "I think my guest won't be joining me after all." He could feel the glances from nearby tables, the whispered conversations barely concealed behind menus. Julian Foster stood up. The man whose facial recognition software had revolutionized security systems worldwide couldn't seem to secure a dinner companion. Behind the mahogany bar, Olivia Parker watched the scene unfold. At 28, she had spent enough time serving the wealthy to recognize genuine disappointment beneath practiced composure. Unlike her co-workers, who were exchanging knowing looks and whispers about the famous billionaire's situation, she saw only a man who'd been hurt. "Table 14 needs to be cleared," her manager Thomas instructed, breaking her observation. "He's been sitting there long enough. We have people waiting." Olivia nodded, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she approached Julian's table. She'd worked at Lumiere for 3 years while pursuing her ceramics career during the day. The restaurant's clientele rarely noticed her beyond placing orders, which suited her fine. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sir," she began, "but I understand," Julian interrupted, reaching for his wallet. "I'll settle the bill and leave." "Actually," Olivia said, surprising herself with her boldness, "I was going to ask if you'd like to order dinner. It seems a shame to waste such a beautiful table." Julian looked up, truly seeing her for the first time. Her eyes were warm amber, direct but kind. No trace of the pity or calculated interest he'd grown accustomed to. "Won't your manager mind?" he asked, noticing Thomas watching them from across the room. Olivia smiled. "I'll handle Thomas. Besides, our chef prepared something special tonight. Duck confit with cherry reduction. It would be criminal not to try it." For the first time that evening, Julian's expression softened. Criminal indeed, though I'd rather not dine alone. "My break starts in 15 minutes, Olivia replied without thinking. "I could join you, just for company." Julian studied her face, searching for an ulterior motive but finding none. "Why would you do that?" "Because everyone deserves a friendly face after a disappointment," she answered honestly. "Even billionaires." A genuine smile crept across Julian's face. "Especially billionaires. We're notoriously poor at handling rejection." Olivia laughed, a warm, unaffected sound that seemed to brighten the dimly lit restaurant. "I'll put your order in then. Duck confit for 1, with company on the side." As she walked away, Julian found himself watching her, the way she moved with quiet confidence, how she smiled at an elderly couple near the window. For the first time in years, his curiosity was piqued by something other than technological innovation. 15 minutes later, Olivia returned with his meal and took the seat across from him. She'd removed her server's apron but still wore the restaurant's uniform, a simple black dress that contrasted with the designer outfits surrounding them. "You don't have to do this," Julian said as she settled in. "I know," Olivia replied, meeting his gaze. "That's why I'm doing it." As Julian took his first bite of the duck, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd shared a meal with someone who wanted nothing from him. The evening that had begun as a disappointment was taking an unexpected turn, and for the first time in a long while, Julian Foster was genuinely intrigued about what might happen next. Unexpected conversations, Olivia's 15-minute break, had stretched into an hour that evening at Lumiere. Thomas had glared daggers at her, but the restaurant's owner, who recognized Julian Foster as a regular high-spending patron, had quietly approved the exception. That night had sparked something neither expected. 2 weeks later, Julian found himself once again at Lumiere, requesting table 14. This time, there was no pretense of waiting for another guest. "Mr. Foster," Olivia greeted him with a professional smile that didn't quite hide her genuine pleasure at seeing him again. "Back for the duck confit?" "Actually," Julian replied, "I was hoping the chef might prepare something adventurous tonight, and perhaps you might have another break coming up." Their second conversation flowed even more easily than the first. Julian learned that Olivia had studied fine arts at the University of Washington before her parents' unexpected deaths 3 years ago had forced her to set aside her ceramics career to support her younger sister Bethany through high school. Olivia discovered that beneath Julian's carefully cultivated public image was a man who still coded for fun, preferred takeout to fine dining most nights, and hadn't taken a vacation in 7 years. "You own 3 private islands," Olivia said incredulously over dessert, a creme brulee they were sharing. "And you haven't visited any of them in years?" Julian shrugged. "What's the point of paradise alone? My assistant goes twice a year to make sure everything's maintained." "That might be the most depressing thing I've ever heard," Olivia laughed, though her eyes held genuine concern. "What about you?" Julian deflected. "When was your last vacation?" Olivia's spoon paused midway to her mouth. "Vacation?" "I vaguely remember the concept. Bethany and I went camping at Lake Chelan the summer before our parents died. That was the last time." Something shifted in Julian's expression. "Tell me about your ceramics." The way Olivia's face transformed when she spoke about her art captivated him. Her hands gestured in the air, shaping invisible clay as she described the studio space she shared with 3 other artists. The collection she was working on, inspired by Pacific Northwest landscapes, and her dream of opening a small gallery shop where working artists could sell directly to customers. "You should show me sometime," Julian said, when she finally paused for breath. Olivia blinked, suddenly self-conscious. "Oh, I don't think. My work is nothing special, really." "I'd still like to see it," he insisted gently. "If you're willing." Their meetings continued, sometimes at Lumiere, sometimes at small cafes Olivia recommended. Julian found himself looking forward to these evenings more than board meetings or industry galas. Olivia introduced him to hole-in-the-wall restaurants where the owners knew her by name, neighborhood bookstores with reading nooks hidden behind shelves, and a farmer's market where the honey vendor always gave her an extra jar for that sweet sister of yours. One rainy afternoon, Julian's driver dropped him at the address Olivia had finally shared, a converted warehouse in the industrial district that housed several artists' studios. He found her space in the back corner, a modest area filled with shelves of pottery in various stages of completion. "This is it," she said nervously, wiping her clay-covered hands on her apron. "Nothing fancy." Julian moved slowly through the space, examining each piece with genuine interest. Her work featured organic forms with intricate textures, mountain ranges carved into mug sides, ocean waves circling bowl rims, forest patterns pressed into plate edges. "These are extraordinary," he said quietly, picking up a mug glazed in shades of blue and green that seemed to capture the essence of Puget Sound. "You've been hiding your talent," Olivia blushed. "They sell reasonably well at local craft fairs. Not enough to quit my night job, but enough to keep Bethany's college fund growing." Julian set down the mug carefully. "How's she doing at Washington State?" "Thriving," Olivia beamed. "Pre-med. First semester and already joining research projects. She got all the academic ambition in the family." "I disagree," Julian said, turning to face her fully. "You have plenty of ambition. Just a different kind." Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in Olivia's chest at his words, the feeling of being truly seen. Later that evening, as they walked along the waterfront sharing an umbrella in the gentle rain, Julian realized he hadn't checked his phone in hours. No emails, no crisis calls, no market updates. Instead, he was listening to Olivia describe the first time she'd worked with a pottery wheel. A complete disaster. Clay everywhere, even in my eyebrows, and feeling more present than he had in years. When he took her hand, neither acknowledged the gesture explicitly, but their fingers intertwined as naturally as if they'd been doing it for years. The billion-dollar empire, the social disparities, the complications that loomed on the horizon, none of it mattered in that moment. "There's a ceramics exhibition in Portland next weekend," Olivia mentioned as they paused to watch ferries cross the Sound. Some of my favorite artists will be there. Julian squeezed her hand gently. Would you like to go? Olivia turned to him, her expression cautious but hopeful. Are you asking to use your private jet to take me to a pottery show? I was thinking we could drive, Julian replied with a smile. I hear the scenery along I-5 is beautiful this time of year. Olivia's laughter echoed across the water, genuine and unrestrained. Terrible. The scenery is terrible, but the company might make it worthwhile. As the rain softened around them and the city lights reflected on the wet pavement, Julian realized he was experiencing something entirely new. Happiness that had nothing to do with success, acquisition, or achievement. It was happiness born simply from connection, from being exactly where he was with exactly who he was with, and it terrified him completely. Worlds apart, their weekend in Portland had been perfect, almost too perfect. They'd spent hours at the ceramics exhibition, where Julian had purchased pieces from several artists Olivia admired, including a sculptor whose waiting list was supposedly 2 years long. It helps to have a recognizable name sometimes, he'd admitted when she'd asked how he'd managed it. They'd stayed at a boutique hotel overlooking the river, rather than the luxury chain where Julian typically lodged, and they'd eaten at food trucks instead of Michelin-starred restaurants. On Sunday evening, reluctant to end their time together, Julian had suggested dinner at his home in Seattle, a modernist mansion overlooking Lake Washington that had been featured in architectural magazines, but had never felt like a home until Olivia stepped through its doors, immediately kicking off her shoes and asking if she could see his kitchen. Now, 3 months into whatever this relationship was becoming, reality was beginning to intrude on their carefully constructed bubble. The board is concerned, said Richard Westfield, Julian's CFO and oldest friend, as they sat in Julian's office 60 floors above Seattle. Your focus has been divided lately, Julian continued, reviewing quarterly projections on his tablet. The company is performing better than ever. We're up 17% from last year. That's not what I mean, and you know it. Richard leaned forward. People are talking, Jules, about the waitress. Julian's fingers stilled on the screen. Her name is Olivia. I know her name, Richard sighed. The point is, others do too. The Seattle Times business section ran a piece yesterday speculating about your relationship. They're calling her a mysterious muse who's distracting you from the company. Julian set down the tablet, his expression hardening. My personal life is not relevant to our shareholders. It became relevant when you took her to the governor's economic summit last week, Richard countered. When you introduced her to our Japanese investors. When you were photographed helping her carry boxes into that arts festival in Ballard. She was exhibiting her work, Julian said quietly. I was supporting her. Richard's expression softened. I know you care about her, Jules, but our investors, our partners, they're watching closely. The Meridian acquisition is delicate. We need them to see you as focused, committed, strategic, not... He trailed off. Not what? Julian's voice carried a warning. Not distracted by someone from a completely different world. Richard held up his hands as Julian's expression darkened. Her background isn't the issue. The timing is, you've been building toward this acquisition for 3 years. It's your vision for quantum-secure communications. Don't let anything jeopardize that. Across the city, in a small apartment above a bookstore in Fremont, Olivia was facing similar concerns from a different angle. He bought out your entire collection at the festival, Bethany said, perched on Olivia's kitchen counter while her sister prepared dinner. That's not normal, Liv. He was being supportive, Olivia defended, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. And he didn't buy them all himself. He introduced me to people who bought pieces. People who work for him, Bethany pointed out. His executive assistant bought 3 bowls. His head of marketing bought a vase. Do you really think they just happen to love your work? Olivia set down the knife. What are you suggesting? Bethany's expression softened. I'm not suggesting anything bad. Julian seems nice, actually, but Liv, he lives in a different universe. His casual dinner costs more than our monthly rent. The watch he wears could pay for my entire medical school education. I'm not with him for his money, Olivia said firmly. I know that, Bethany replied gently. But does he? Does he understand what it's like to count pennies, to work double shifts, to worry about making rent? Can you really be equals when everything is so unbalanced? The questions haunted Olivia as she prepared for dinner at Julian's home that evening. She'd started keeping clothes there, nothing fancy, just a few practical items, but tonight she found herself scrutinizing her simple dress and cardigan, wondering if she would ever truly belong in his world. When Julian's driver picked her up, a concession she'd reluctantly accepted after Julian had expressed genuine concern about her taking late-night buses, she noticed he seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly during the drive. Dinner was uncharacteristically quiet. Julian seemed preoccupied, responding to her questions about his day with short answers before turning the conversation back to her work or Bethany's studies. It wasn't until they were seated in his living room with glasses of wine that she finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Something's bothering you," she said directly. "Is it work or is it us?" Julian looked up, momentarily surprised by her directness before his expression softened. "Both, I suppose. The lines are blurring." "Because of me," Olivia stated rather than asked. "Because people can't mind their own business," Julian corrected, setting down his glass. "The company is approaching a critical acquisition. Apparently, some people are concerned that my personal life is affecting my professional focus. Are they right?" Olivia asked quietly. Julian studied her face, the genuine concern in her amber eyes, the slight furrow between her brows. "Yes," he admitted, "but not in the way they think. I'm more focused, more clear-headed than I've been in years. You've helped me remember why I started the company in the first place. To create technology that connects people, not isolates them." He moved closer to her on the sofa, taking her hand. "The problem isn't you, Olivia. It's that for the first time in my adult life, I'm prioritizing something besides work. That scares people who are used to having my complete attention." Olivia squeezed his hand but remained troubled. "At the governor's summit last week, I overheard someone ask if I was your community service project." Julian's expression darkened. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter," Olivia sighed. "The point is, they weren't entirely wrong. You've bought my pottery, introduced me to influential people, taken me to events where I stick out like a dolphin at a shark convention. That's not—" "Let me finish," she said gently. "I appreciate everything you've done, I do. My sales have increased, I've received commissions I never would have gotten otherwise. But Julian, I need to know this isn't just you being generous to the struggling artist. I need to know you see me as an equal, not a project." The vulnerability in her voice struck Julian deeply. He reached up to touch her cheek. "Olivia Parker, you are the most genuine, talented, compassionate person I've ever met. If anything, I'm not your equal. Money and success are easy compared to what you've done. Raising your sister, pursuing your art despite every obstacle, finding joy in small moments. You've taught me more about living in 3 months than I've learned in 42 years. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. But before she could respond, Julian's phone rang with the specific tone he used for urgent business matters. He glanced at it regretfully. "Take it," she encouraged. "It's okay." As Julian stepped away to take the call, Olivia wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Their reflections were superimposed over the twinkling lights of the city. Julian, in his tailored clothes, speaking rapidly into his phone, gesturing with precise movements. Olivia, in her simple dress, arms crossed protectively across her chest. Two worlds colliding, neither quite sure how to reconcile with the other. Breaking Point, the Meridian acquisition, had entered its final, most critical phase. Julian found himself working 18-hour days, video conferencing with teams across 3 continents, and fielding constant questions from the board. He'd canceled dinner with Olivia twice in 1 week, something that hadn't happened since they began seeing each other. "I understand completely," she assured him over the phone. "This is important." Julian rubbed his eyes, exhaustion seeping into his bones as he looked out over the Seattle skyline from his office. It was past midnight. "Once this deal closes, things will settle down." "I promise." "Don't worry about me," Olivia said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I have good news, actually. Remember that gallery in Pioneer Square that shows local artists? They've offered me space in their summer showcase. Julian straightened. That's fantastic. When does it open? 2 weeks from Friday, she replied, excitement evident in her voice. It's not a solo show or anything, just a small collection alongside other ceramic artists. But it's a start. It's more than a start, Julian insisted. It's recognition you deserve. We should celebrate. Let's wait until after your acquisition closes, Olivia suggested. I know how busy you are. After they hung up, Julian sat in his darkened office, thinking. Despite her reassurances, he felt a growing distance between them, a product of his absences and the increasing scrutiny their relationship faced in his professional circles. He needed to show her that she remained a priority, that her achievements mattered to him as much as his own. An idea began to form. The next morning, Julian called Andrew Pearson, his head of public relations. I need information on the summer showcase at Pioneer Square Gallery, Julian explained. One of the featured artists is Olivia Parker. Andrew, ever efficient, returned the call within hours. Small but respected gallery. The showcase includes 5 ceramic artists, 3 painters, and 2 sculptors, mostly emerging talents. The owner, Diane Kwan, has a good eye for discovering promising artists before they break through. What would it take to make this a bigger opportunity for Olivia? Julian asked. Sir? Andrew sounded confused. I want to help elevate her visibility. Perhaps sponsorship from Quantum Innovations for the event? We could frame it as supporting local artists. Maybe invite some influential collectors, critics. Andrew cleared his throat. That could certainly be arranged, however— What? Julian prompted when Andrew hesitated. If you'll permit me to speak freely— Sir, any direct involvement from you or the company might create the impression that Ms. Parker's inclusion is due to your influence rather than her talent. Julian frowned. It was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid. I see your point. What do you suggest? Perhaps a more subtle approach, Andrew offered. I have contacts in the arts community who could attend, evaluate her work independently. If they're impressed, which, based on what I've heard, seems likely, their interest would be authentic and valuable. Julian considered this. Make it happen. But Andrew, they can't know this came from me. Olivia values her independence fiercely. Understood, sir. For the next 2 weeks, Julian navigated the final stages of the acquisition while making arrangements through Andrew. Between conference calls and contract reviews, he sourced premium wines for the showcase, arranged for Seattle's most influential arts blogger to attend, and even contacted the curator of the Seattle Art Museum's contemporary crafts collection, all without revealing his involvement. The night of the showcase arrived. Julian had managed to clear his schedule, declining a dinner with Meridian's executives to be there for Olivia's moment. He arrived early, wanting to see her work displayed professionally before the crowds arrived. The gallery was transformed for the event. Olivia's ceramics occupied a well-lit corner, her Pacific Northwest-inspired pieces arranged thoughtfully on pedestals and shelves. Pride swelled in Julian's chest as he observed visitors pausing at her display, admiring the craftsmanship, discussing the glazing techniques. He spotted Olivia across the room, radiant in a simple emerald dress, speaking animatedly with a woman he recognized as the SAM curator. Their conversation seemed intense, positive, with the curator taking notes as Olivia explained something about her process. Julian kept his distance, not wanting to interrupt. He mingled instead with other attendees, many of whom, he noted with satisfaction, were discussing Olivia's work. The subtle arrangements he'd made through Andrew seemed to be bearing fruit without drawing attention to his involvement. Later, as the event reached its peak, he finally approached Olivia, kissing her cheek. Your work looks stunning. How are you feeling? Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Overwhelmed, honestly. The response has been amazing. 3 pieces already sold, and the curator from SAM wants to see my studio next week. I'm not surprised, Julian said genuinely. Your talent speaks for itself. Olivia squeezed his hand gratefully. Thank you for coming. I know how busy you are with the acquisition. I wouldn't have missed this, he assured her. The evening continued successfully. Julian watched proudly as Olivia navigated conversations with art enthusiasts and potential buyers. Everything was going perfectly until he overheard a conversation that turned his blood cold. "Quite the turnout for a summer showcase," a man in a tailored suit was saying to a companion near the wine table. Diane mentioned they've never had the curator from Sam attend before. "Well, when Julian Foster takes an interest in an unknown artist, people pay attention," his companion replied. "My assistant handles the PR for this place. Said they received a very generous anonymous donation specifically for tonight's event, along with some pointed suggestions about who should be invited. Not hard to connect the dots when the guest list includes half of Foster's social circle." Julian moved away quickly, hoping Olivia hadn't overheard. But as he scanned the room for her, he found her standing frozen near the conversation, her face pale with realization. Their eyes met across the crowded gallery. The hurt and betrayal in her expression were unmistakable. She turned and walked quickly toward the back of the gallery. Julian followed, finding her in a small office, hands braced against a desk, breathing deeply. "Olivia," he began, "I can explain. Did you arrange all this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the emotion evident on her face. "The curator, the critics, the sales?" Julian hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path forward. "I wanted to support you, to give your talent the recognition it deserves. By orchestrating this entire evening," her voice rose slightly, "making people pretend to be interested in my work?" "No one is pretending," Julian insisted. "I just made sure the right people saw your work. What they think of it, whether they purchase it, that's all based on your talent, not my influence." Olivia laughed bitterly. "Do you really believe that?" "Julian, these people came because of you. They're buying because of you. You've made my achievement meaningless." "That's not fair," Julian protested. "I was trying to help. I never asked for your help." Olivia's composure finally broke. "I wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To have my first significant professional moment tainted by the suspicion that none of it was earned?" Julian reached for her, but she stepped back. "Olivia, please. Your work is extraordinary. All I did was ensure people noticed." "That wasn't your decision to make," she said quietly, the anger in her voice replaced by profound disappointment. "This is exactly what I feared, that to you I'm a project, something to fix or improve." "That's not how I see you," Julian insisted. "Then why couldn't you trust me to succeed on my own? Why did you feel the need to manipulate this situation behind my back?" She shook her head, tears threatening. "I need to go. I can't be here right now. Olivia, please. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, gathering her purse. "You did what you thought was best, like you always do. But you never considered what I wanted or needed. That's the problem, Julian. In your world, money and influence solve everything. But they've ruined the one thing that mattered most to me, knowing I earned this opportunity." She moved past him toward the door. "Please don't follow me. I need space to think." Julian stood alone in the small office, the sounds of the successful event he'd helped create continuing without them. For all his business acumen, all his strategic thinking, he realized he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation with the person who mattered most. He had tried to help Olivia in the way he knew how, with resources and connections. But in doing so, he'd undermined the very thing she valued most, her independence and the integrity of her accomplishments. As he returned to the gallery floor, the success of the evening felt hollow. Olivia's pieces continued to draw attention and praise, but the artist herself was gone. Julian realized with painful clarity that some problems couldn't be solved with money or influence. Some required something far more difficult: genuine understanding, respect for boundaries, and the humility to recognize when helping meant stepping back, not stepping in. The Meridian acquisition would close successfully the following week, marking the pinnacle of Julian's business achievement. But as he stood surrounded by art lovers admiring Olivia's work, he understood he might have lost something infinitely more valuable than any business deal. Finding balance, 3 weeks had passed since the gallery showcase. 3 weeks of unanswered calls, brief text responses, and a growing hollow feeling in Julian's chest that no business success could fill. The Meridian acquisition had closed successfully, stock prices had soared, and industry publications were calling it the strategic move of the year. None of it mattered. Julian sat in his home office, staring out at the rain-slicked surface of Lake Washington. On his desk sat one of Olivia's mugs, a piece swirled with blues and greens that captured the essence of the Northwest waters. He'd been drinking his morning coffee from it every day, a small connection to her that he couldn't bring himself to relinquish. His phone buzzed. Julian snatched it up, hoping, but it was only Richard. "The board is thrilled with the quarterly projections," his CFO reported. "They're asking about the expansion timeline." "I'm stepping back," Julian interrupted. A pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm taking a leave of absence," Julian clarified. "Effective immediately. For at least 3 months? Jules, we just completed the biggest acquisition in company history. This is not the time to—" "It's exactly the time," Julian said firmly. "The integration team is excellent. The strategy is clear, and I'm not present." After ending the call with a stunned Richard, Julian made a decision he should have made weeks ago. He got into his car, not the chauffeur-driven luxury sedan, but the modest Volvo he rarely used, and drove to Fremont. The bell above the bookstore door jingled as he entered. The owner, a woman with silver-streaked hair, looked up from her inventory list. "We close in 15 minutes, she said, then paused, recognition dawning. "You're Julian Foster," Julian nodded. "Is Olivia upstairs?" The owner's expression turned protective. "She might be. Why?" "I need to talk to her," Julian said simply. "I've made a terrible mistake." The woman studied him for a long moment. "Second floor, apartment 2B. But if she doesn't want to see you, you leave." "Understood?" Julian nodded gratefully and climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. At apartment 2B, he hesitated before knocking. What if she refused to speak with him? What if it was too late? The door opened before he could knock. Olivia stood there in paint-splattered clothes, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, clay dust on her cheek. She looked surprised but not upset to see him. "How did you know I was here?" Julian asked. "Mrs. Winters called up," Olivia explained. "Said, and I quote, 'That billionaire fellow you were dating is here looking like a lost puppy.'" Despite everything, Julian found himself smiling. Accurate assessment. Olivia didn't invite him in immediately, but she didn't close the door either. "Why are you here, Julian?" "To apologize," he said simply. "And to listen, if you'll let me." She studied him for a moment before stepping back to let him enter. The apartment was small but filled with light and character, plants crowding the windowsills, bookshelves overflowing, and ceramic pieces in various stages of completion scattered across a work table. It felt more like a home than his mansion ever had. "Tea?" she offered, moving toward the tiny kitchen. "Please!" They sat at her small kitchen table, mugs of tea steaming between them. Julian noticed she was using one of her own creations, a mug with forest patterns pressed into its surface. "I'm sorry," he began. "What I did was wrong. I should have respected your independence, your need to succeed on your own terms." Olivia nodded slowly. "Yes, you should have." "I've been thinking about why I did it," Julian continued. "I told myself I was helping, but the truth is I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of not being needed," he admitted, the realization crystallizing as he spoke. "All my life, my value has been in what I could provide, solutions, money, opportunities. With you, it was different. You never needed those things from me. You just needed me, and I didn't know how to be that person." Olivia's expression softened. "I never wanted to reject your help, Julian. I just wanted it to be offered openly, with respect for my choices. Partners support each other, but they don't manipulate situations behind each other's back." "I know that now," Julian said. "I won't make that mistake again." A small smile touched Olivia's lips. "That sounds suspiciously like you're planning a future where you could make that mistake again." Hope flickered in Julian's chest. "I'd like that chance, yes. If you're willing?" Olivia sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Things can't go back to how they were. I can't be the waitress dating the billionaire anymore. The power imbalance was too great." "I've taken a leave of absence from Quantum," Julian said. 3 months, possibly more." Surprise flickered across Olivia's face. "What about Meridian? The integration?" "The team can handle it," Julian said. "For the first time in my career, I'm putting something else first." "What will you do?" Olivia asked. Julian leaned forward. "That depends partly on you." But I've been thinking about establishing a foundation to support working artists, providing studio space, materials, exhibition opportunities, not through direct funding that might compromise artistic integrity, but through infrastructure and community building. That sounds remarkable, Olivia said carefully. But what will you personally do with your time? Julian smiled slightly. I thought I might learn pottery. A startled laugh escaped Olivia. You're not serious. Completely serious, Julian insisted. I've been building things with code my entire career. I'd like to try building something with my hands for a change. I hear there's a talented instructor in Fremont who might be willing to teach me. Olivia studied him, amusement mingling with genuine curiosity. You'd be starting from scratch. It's messy, frustrating work. I'm counting on it, Julian said sincerely. I need to remember what it's like to be a beginner again. To create something that can't be rushed with money or connections. Something in Olivia's expression shifted. She reached across the table and took his hand. If we do this, if we try again, we need balance. Real balance. Not you stepping into my world or me trying to fit into yours. We build something new together. Julian squeezed her hand gently. That's exactly what I want. 6 months later, the arts community of Seattle gathered for the opening of Cornerstone Studios, a converted warehouse in the industrial district that now housed affordable studio spaces for 20 artists. A gallery, a cafe, and community classrooms where established artists taught workshops to aspiring creators of all ages and backgrounds. Olivia, now the foundation's creative director while maintaining her own flourishing ceramics career, stood beside Julian as they welcomed guests. Her newest collection, pieces inspired by transformation and renewal, had already sold out in pre-orders. Julian, more relaxed than anyone could remember seeing him, proudly showed visitors the small ceramic studio where he spent 3 mornings each week learning the craft under Olivia's sometimes merciless instruction. His pieces were still lopsided, imperfect things, but he displayed them with more pride than any business award. Your 10 o'clock appointment is here, Olivia whispered, nodding toward the entrance where the curator from the Museum of Modern Art in New York was arriving. Our appointment, Julian corrected gently. This is your vision as much as mine. As they moved to greet the curator, Julian reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He still ran Quantum Innovations, but with a more balanced approach, delegating more, trusting his team, leaving work at reasonable hours. Olivia still created her art, and occasionally picked up shifts at Lumiere when a colleague needed coverage, not because she needed the income anymore, but because it kept her connected to the community that had supported her through difficult years. They had found their balance, not by erasing their differences or pretending they didn't exist, but by building a bridge between their worlds, strong enough for both to cross freely. That evening, after the last guests had departed and they stood alone in the quiet gallery, Julian wrapped his arms around Olivia from behind as they looked out at the space they had created together. Happy? He asked softly. Olivia leaned back against him, covering his hands with her own. Completely. Though I still think your latest bowl looks like it was made by a particularly uncoordinated child. Julian laughed, the sound echoing through the gallery. That's why I need you, to keep me humble. Among other reasons, she replied, turning in his arms to face him. As their lips met, Julian marveled at how a failed date and a waitress's kindness had led him here, not to a standard happily ever after of wealth and luxury, but to something far more precious, a life of purpose, balance, and authentic connection. In the end, Julian Foster hadn't needed to be saved by love. He had needed to learn how to love, not by giving or fixing or controlling, but by respecting, listening, and growing. And in Olivia Parker, he had found not just a partner, but a teacher, showing him that true wealth lay not in what you possessed, but in what you built together.